Dr. John Bukowski. How are you, sir?
Good, Kino. Nice to meet you. Thanks for having me on.
No problem at all. Thank you so much for coming on. Likewise, how's your day so far? You coming to us from the States, am I correct?
Yes, I am coming from the state of Ohio right now, Southern Ohio.
Southern Ohio. But you formerly from Detroit, is that correct?
Well, I was originally from Detroit, grew up there in the 60s and 70s, and 6 kids in the family.
Okay.
In the Motor City.
So what made you leave Detroit? Wanted to explore?
Well, I left Detroit mostly because of job opportunities, and I practiced veterinary medicine in Detroit for about 7 years while I was getting advanced degrees in research. And then I went out east to New Jersey for a while and worked out there. That's where my fiance at the time, now my wife, was working. And we moved around quite a bit. We spent about 10 or 12 years in New Jersey, a couple of years in Prince Edward Island, Canada, where I headed up a research center. And the rest of the time, mostly in Southern Ohio, which is where we're kind of calling home now.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, change of environment is not a bad thing,
Yeah.
Depending on which group one wants for their life.
Gives you a little bit of different view of the world. We're planning a trip. We have a trip all scheduled in November out to Europe to look at the river cruise on the Danube. All the historic sites around the Danube in Vienna and Budapest and all that stuff. So that should be fun.
Nice, definitely. Wow. Fun and exciting.
Yeah.
Well, at least you're out there, living your best life, which is what all of us should be doing.
Yes, absolutely.
So, John, you are an award-winning author, former practitioner, health researcher, and medical writer. Before the books,
Guilty.
Before the medical field, sorry?
Guilty.
Yeah, guilty as charged. Before the books, before the medical field, before the awards, where did it all start for John?
It all started, I'm a person who's had a gift or perhaps a curse of being interested in many things. So in school, I was, and all throughout my growing up, very interested in reading and writing, loved my English classes, very interested in history, and I still to this day read a lot of fiction and history, and very interested in science. And so I pursued all of those in through high school, but when you get into college, I decided to focus on a scientific career. So you kind of focus on that, and the other things go to the wayside. And I went to veterinary school and practiced veterinary medicine in Detroit, as I said, for about 7 years or so, and then got advanced degrees in public health research and did that for the next 20 years. And one thing that I discovered while I was doing the public health research was that I was doing less and less research and more writing. My people I worked for recognized I could write, and I enjoyed it. So that springboarded me, if that's a word, to I'm a writer, springboarded me to do medical writing. And I did that for 7 or 8 years. And then I decided I was going to drop the medical writing completely and focus on fiction. So that's what I write now. Mostly thrillers, but not totally.
So when we talk about public health research, what are we talking about here? Exactly.
If you remember during the COVID pandemic, there was a bunch of people called epidemiologists. They were the people who study disease patterns, rates of disease, what caused them. That's what I did. I got a master's and a PhD in public health epidemiology. And I worked in the occupational and environmental epidemiology field for about 15, 18 years.
Wow. It's quite some time.
Yeah. I worked both in industry and in government.
And which is better?
Each had their problems. Industry definitely pays better, but it's a very constricting environment. Lots of rules, lots of things you can and can't do, more stressful. Whereas government, you have to deal with the bureaucracy and all the craziness. There's just things in government that make you pull your hair out because they're so stupid.
So, screw out global pandemic.
Yeah, you get ulcers in each, but from very different things.
Yeah. And I mean, when we look at the global health scene, from a macro point of view, we're still dealing with a lot of hardships when it comes to it, especially with public health.
Oh, yeah. Globally, it's a very different animal than in the United States, for example, or in Europe. Mostly what the Western countries deal with is what they call chronic disease epidemiology. Chronic diseases like cancer and heart disease and things like that. What causes them, how to prevent them. In much of the developing world, they're still dealing with basics of sanitation, water supply, food, sufficient quantity and quality of food, basic medical care, those kind of things. So it's a really different animal, depending on where in the world you are.
Yeah. I mean, the examples you mentioned, I can use Africa as an example,
Excuse me?
I can use Africa as an example.
Yeah. There is, I studied a lot of, through part of my career, I studied a lot of environmental entomology, which is insects and the diseases, medical entomology, the diseases that they spread. And certainly those are still huge problems in much of the world, everything from malaria to dengue fever to West Nile virus to sleeping sickness, trypanosomiasis, all of the parasitic diseases, schistosomiasis and all that stuff. Still very big problems. And basic public health, just basic anti-parasite drugs and basic antibiotics. And like I said, clean water. All of those can make a big difference in the developing world.
Yeah. You have, massive experience and knowledge when it comes to healthcare. So when we look at the philanthropists of the world, such as Bill Gates, who wants to cure some of the diseases that you mentioned, what's your opinion on that? Why are we not getting it right, even though there's so much funding backing it up?
Well, there's a bunch of different answers to that. First of all, there's so many different diseases, and they're all very different. Even just within cancer, there is not one cancer. There are various diseases we call cancer, which are related, but they're all very different causes, different treatments, different genetics. Then there's all the parasitic diseases, all the infectious diseases, all the heart disease issues. So it's a vast arena to tackle. That's number one. Number two, a lot of it is logistics. There are geopolitical problems throughout the world that stop medical care or nutrition from getting to where they need to be, places that are in war or where governments are possibly corrupt, things like that. So there's politicals, things, economic things, basics of public health, like I said, water, sanitation, differences, and a vast array of diseases. People sometimes act as if or feel that there shouldn't be any disease, and that would be great. But the human body, the human animal, all animal life is subject to both chronic and infectious diseases. And it's how you deal with them, really, that as they always say, no one gets out of this world alive.
I agree with what you said about the political red tape. That's an obvious one. Look, the medical field is $1 billion industry. So if we don't have diseases, if we don't have sickness, then the pharmaceutical companies, the medical companies are not really going to generate the billions that they do each and every single year.
I have certainly heard that. It was not my experience that the medical companies were trying to manipulate anything or whatever. Like I said, disease of one form or another is not the exception, it's the rule. And animals are going to get diseases. Certainly, I know that from veterinary medicine. People are going to get diseases. Pharmaceutical companies attempt to address those where they can. It's a very difficult job. Most people don't know that for every successful drug that comes out, there's probably 50 or 100 failures where at some point in the process, maybe before it got to human trials or after human trials, the drug and the disease that was trying to fit didn't mesh right, either because of side effects or because of efficacy. And so, drug companies, by and large, they want to make a profit, just like any company does. But they are basically addressing problems that are already there. They don't create problems they don't create diseases. I mean, the diseases exist, and drug companies simply try to, or not so simply, try to address them where they can.
So we can conclude COVID wasn't created in a lab.
Well, that's certainly consensus now that it was. Certainly, people also never understood that during that pandemic. It's COVID is a coronavirus. And they said, well, wait a minute. They said there were coronaviruses 20 years ago. There's been coronaviruses forever. This was a new type. And that was the reason it was so dangerous to so many people, is we've never seen it before. So the body doesn't know how to deal with it. Flu, we've all existed and had flu at some point, or colds or whatever, those types of viruses. And over time, your body develops mechanisms to deal with the different variants of those diseases, those viruses. So when you get it, it's not that serious. Flu, don't get me wrong, flu can still kill you, especially if you have pulmonary problems or heart problems. People die of the flu all the time. Tens of thousands of them, or hundreds of thousands around the world. But most people don't have much of a problem. And that was the difference with COVID. The people who got it, who had serious issues like immune suppression, heart disease, obesity, they were hit the hardest because, number one, their body didn't know how to handle it. And number two, they already were compromised. So, there was a lot of misinformation about COVID. But the consensus was that it was made in the Chinese lab. At least, though, that version of the coronavirus was made in the Chinese labs.
Well, I mean, when you're living in the digital era, there's going to be a million different opinions of misinformation that will be floating around all the time. Yeah, it's just on any topic.
Right. And social media has been worse in some respects because people, they always joke, there's a Google PhD. You can look it up on Google, so you must know. Well, a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. If you don't understand, I do a course on research for fiction writers. And I tell people, one of the things I tell them is, it's easy to get research now. But you don't want to start talking about things you don't understand because you picked up a tidbit off of Google or Wikipedia.
Yeah.
People who do know it will see that you're ignorant on the subject because you're misusing it. And that's true throughout social media. A lot of knowledge is either misinterpreted, misused, or downright wrong. There is no, I come from a world where you publish journal articles in science. They have to be peer reviewed. Other people like you have to look at them and say they make sense. There's none of that on social media.
Yeah. You know, I'm grateful that at least I can have an expert on the subject come on the podcast, to give us the correct information, Ask
Now,
the expert before you come to your own conclusion. I got one more question on COVID out of curiosity. How
sure.
does the virus start at one point and then evolve into different variants?
Um, it's a genetic change that happens. Everything is made up of genes, DNA or RNA. We've all heard those terms. They're the things that make us what we are, the building blocks, the blueprint for the body. And there's mutations that occur within the virus, damage that's repaired incorrectly or differently. So the virus changes, and sometimes the change is minor. Sometimes the change makes it less virulent, less dangerous. Sometimes the change makes it more dangerous. But the body doesn't necessarily recognize the change. So each time the change happens, it's a hit and miss whether the body's defense mechanisms recognize it. So we get back to that thing where it's novel again. And that's why there's some versions of the flu that are much more dangerous than others. The genetic variants are different. So it's a process. It happens in our bodies all the time where we're getting genetic damage that's repaired. As a matter of fact, cancer begins with genetic damage that is not repaired properly. And so the cells take off in a strange direction that's dangerous. So yeah, it's just a matter of a genetic change within the virus. And viruses are fascinating because they're not, if you had to call them living or dead, they're in between. They don't have the components we think of as a living cell or a living organism, but yet they still can infect people or infect cells and cause them to reproduce the virus. So you have a thing that's not really living that is being reproduced and causing problems. So virology is a very interesting area.
Sure. Interesting. Thank you. I love to learn something new each and every single day.
No, yeah, absolutely. Lifelong learning. This is more. Well, always see. They ask me about, what's the best advice for writers? And I always say the best advice I ever heard and in my own life is read a lot and write a lot. You can't learn to be a writer without being a reader, and you can't learn to be a writer without writing. There's a lot of people who want to be fiction writers, and they never write anything. So that's not going to work. Or they don't read, and that's not going to work either. It's like trying to build a house without blueprints. You need to see how it's front. You need to see how you need to watch somebody do it before you can try to do it. And that's what reading is. Read the most in the genre, the types of fiction you want to write. But all fiction is worthwhile. For example, my books are mostly thrillers. I have 4 thrillers right now. Project Suicide, Checkout Time, Bad Pennies, which is a sequel to Project Suicide, and The Peeper. These are all thrillers. But in December, I have a women's fiction book, kind of a Hallmark movie kind of book called And a Child Shall Lead Him. So you don't have to focus necessarily on one genre.
That is the second time in a row this week that I've heard that. You don't have to focus on one genre.
Right. It's just reading widely can help you where you could write in different genres. If you only read thrillers, you're probably going to stick to thrillers because that's what you know. Write what you know is an old adage, but it's still true.
But I mean, even if you're like me, I'm not an author, but I mean, reading different genres on different topics, enhances me as a person,
Right.
So now I know,
Absolutely.
okay, cool, I'm educated on this topic, I'm educated on that topic. I don't have to be a professional expert or work in that field, but at least now when John is speaking about something, I'm like, yeah, I know what he's talking about. I read about that once upon a time.
Yeah,
So it
absolutely.
makes sense.
It's life. I'm a big believer in lifelong learning. I also tell people in the research course that I give for fiction writers, I say, you're going to do a lot of research, but you're only going to include a little bit of it in the book, because if you make a fiction book all about the research instead of the characters and their journey, it's boring, and you don't want your writing to be boring. It's a technical manual instead of fiction. But the very fact that you learned this will make your writing more powerful. You'll pick up things, and your writing will have more potency, more impact, just because of the fact that you learn things.
Yeah. So let's talk about your books. Project Suicide and Checkout Time both have won awards.
Yes.
What is Project Suicide about?
I'll show you the cover here, if I can get it up there. There's Project Suicide.
Oh, I love the cover.
Yeah, it's a nice cover. Bear Pitzer did a nice job. And it's a story of how a cure for Alzheimer's disease is perverted into an assassination drug. Now, high-profile politicians are killing themselves, and only a drunken genius can save the country.
That's a nice twist.
Yeah, that's what's called a log line. You put it all into one or two lines. And as I'm going out and speaking at book clubs and stuff, I'm always, I was not really surprised, but I thought it was humorous that one of the things people liked the most about it was that politicians were killing themselves.
Yeah. But I mean, I got to say, the name is intriguing, Project Suicide. That is a really cool name. Yeah, what made you think of that name? How did that come about?
I was originally going to call it Project Seppuku, because that's the name of the project in the book, and seppuku is a Japanese ritual suicide. But I thought, and the publisher agreed, that the average person might not pick up on that. And a title's important. It should be engaging, and it should give you some idea about what the book's about. So the big things: title, back cover blurb, and cover. That's what gets people to look into a book and want to read it. So that was for Project Suicide. We made it Project Suicide because it's a better, more understandable title.
Yeah. No, it's definitely intriguing. And then looking at the cover myself now, I would definitely be, interested in looking at the book. When we focus now on the word suicide, which is a global pandemic.
Sure.
Okay, suicide. Is that something that you passionate about? Where you could say that.
When I came up with the idea for the book, and a big thing for writers getting ideas, people always say, where do your ideas come from? They come from thinking and asking what if. That's the biggest thing. I was at the time, this is quite a few years ago, I was visiting my father-in-law once a week, and he had mild dementia. Not Alzheimer's per se, but a mild dementia. And I was thinking about, boy, I hope they're finding a cure for that. And then the brain starts going. And you say, okay, if they found a cure, though, what if it had a side effect? Okay, what could be a bad side effect? Well, death is a bad side effect, but that's not much of a book. There's lots of drugs that have that side effect, and they never go any farther. So I thought, well, what if the side effect was you're getting better, but as you get better and get self-awareness, you get self-loathing, and you end up killing yourself. Now that is much more of an engaging idea. You see people improve, and then they kill themselves. How tragic. But then I thought the final what if, which is the one that really focused the book, was what if you gave this drug that causes people to kill themselves while they're getting better from Alzheimer's, but the person doesn't have Alzheimer's? they would still kill themselves. And
Yeah.
wouldn't an assassin like that, how nice would it be to give a drug to someone secretively and have them do the job for you? And there's obviously political implications to that. And so I just went with that.
Yeah. Wow. That is like, I mean, you went all out with imagination on that one.
And that's what writing is. It's I
Yeah.
too in the research course. Never forget, you're writing fiction. We're making this stuff up. We're telling lies, but you want the lies to be believable, and that's where the research comes in. You make it's like being a con artist. You know, you make the thing sound like you know what you're doing, and then you try to sell the book and bridge or whatever. So that's what we're basically telling lies, and never forget you're doing that. It's okay to stretch the truth, and that's what fiction is.
Yeah. In some cases, you know, there can be this dotted line between fiction and nonfiction.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. The book may be released as fiction, you know, like there's this whole awesome storyline to it, but there's also a lot of truth in it that is actually happening in the world.
That's been the case with a lot of science fiction. And Project Suicide is what they call techno-fiction or almost science fiction. For example, the show Star Trek, many of the things on that, you know, like communicators and have been realized, you know, that the future has caught up with them. So that's what science fiction is. It's speculation based on a little science.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, it's like watching a Marvel movie.
Right.
It's fantasy, but there's still a lot of, for me, my opinion, you know, nonfiction chapters in there. You know, if we see the development, the technological developments that's happening, you know, and if you go back and you watch the first Marvel movie that came out, you know, it's happening right now. Right. You know, if you watch Terminator, you know, in the 90s, and you see what's happening now with artificial intelligence.
You see all these robots doing all this stuff. It's the vision of the future sometimes comes to pass.
Yeah.
Now, with the second book, Checkout Time, and I'll put that cover up here.
I love your covers. I just love all your covers. Wow.
That's a story of a suicide or an arsonist or bomber who is looking to extort money from hotels. Pay me or I'll bomb your hotel. He's pursued by a beautiful FBI agent and a handsome government researcher until he turns the tables and the hunters become the hunted. So this is much more of a straight crime thriller where somebody's doing a crime or a series of crimes and people are trying to stop him. And it was fun for me, though, to explore different kinds of ways you can make a bomb. The FBI is probably watching me now because I've been on the internet so much looking at ways to make bombs. But you can make napalm at home, you can make thermite at home, ways to do these things. And so that was fun for me in introducing a little of that research. That's the little bit of truth that adds authenticity to the writing. But the story is really about the suicide bomber, the people pursuing him. It's the characters. That's what people sometimes forget when they're writing fiction. You can have the most interesting plot, but if the characters aren't interesting, if people don't like them or find them interesting, because villains aren't necessarily likable, but they're interesting, good ones. Hannibal Lecter is a perfect example. But it's the people and their journey and the hardships they have to overcome to achieve their journey. That is what people really want to read.
Yeah. And when it comes to your character development, what's your process? Every author has their own process, you know, when it comes to character development.
People always ask, where do the characters come from? Well, they come from me, some aspects of my personality, some aspects of people that I know, people that I have observed, people that I can imagine. It's like being an actor. I've done some stage acting. You bring the characters through you when you present them. So likewise, they come through you onto the page. So developing the characters is all those things together, but it's all me.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And
No, it does.
Stephen King talks about, he's one of my favorite writers. He talks about the need to let the dark half out, because we all have different parts of our personality. There's the stuff we show everybody all the time. Then there's the stuff we think behind closed doors, or the wish we have. If I had a chance, I would just get rid of that person. That kind of stuff. The darker part of our personality. As a fiction writer, you can let that out. As a matter of fact, you have to let it out. And when you're writing, I've heard people say, forget that your grandmother is going to read it someday, and write as if no one's going to read it. You can let your deepest self out. And that goes into character development as it does into the rest of the writing.
Yeah, that's good advice, eh? That's good advice for up-and-coming authors to take away.
Yeah.
Is. Yeah. 100%. So we got a sequel that's also coming out, or coming out in 2025.
It's been out. A sequel to Project Suicide called Bad Pennies. And that's the continuation of that we got the same old problem with the suicide drug, but now there's somebody from the past who's not supposed to be around, but is around, causing trouble and wants revenge. So it's another techno thriller, but the focus is really on the revenge story and the way that impacts my protagonists, Amy and Deacon. Deacon's the drunken genius, and Amy is his sidekick and love interest.
Okay, nice. So do you plan in the future
that came out in May, by the way?
Sorry?
That came out in May,
Although
it wasn't available on Amazon until later for some glitch.
Glitch technology.
Yeah, Amazon is fun to deal with. That's what my publisher.
It's not profit. So, I mean, since you started a sequel, from Project Suicide, do you plan to continue?
I don't know. It's going to depend on the popularity of these two offerings. Right now, like I said, I've got one book coming out that's a women's fiction, what they call in the industry chick lit. That's just a term. And I always tell people it's like a Hallmark movie, or a Lifetime movie. And then I just signed under a contract to bring out a horror novel next year about a magic book that's out to control the world kind of thing. And it's called Ars Beneficia, The Art of Sorcery. And so that'll be coming out probably in September or October of 2026. And I also write short stories. I've had 21 of them published. And I've taken 19 of those and put them into a collection, which I hope to get published in the next year or so. It just was a finalist for an award this past summer, the Claymore Award at Killer Nashville, a conference in Nashville, Tennessee. So I'm hopeful that will be published sometimes in the next year or two.
And when it comes to your publishing, do you work with one traditional publisher, or is there several publishers?
Well, the first publisher I was working with was the publisher for Checkout Time, Project Suicide, and Bad Pennies. I had a second publisher for a book, my latest thriller, which is called The Peeper, about a serial killer who stalks social media. And that was published by Rogue Phoenix, which is a different traditional publisher. And both the horror book and the women's fiction book, And a Child Shall Lead Him, will be coming out under Page Turner Publishing, which is another traditional publisher. So Uh, I pitch to who I think is the most appropriate for that work.
Yeah. That's
And
interesting, that you can actually work with several publishers at the same time and you're not like under any contractual obligation to stick with one with all your books.
no, you're under a contractual obligation for the book that you sign with. Those
Right.
contracts could run anywhere from 2 to 5 years, being able to be continued if you're both happy with it. And I've been fortunate the publishers that I've worked with have all been very good and very legitimate. And that's something new writers have to look for. You want to be, you want to make sure you're not dealing with somebody who's shady, who wants to take your money, that kind of thing. But yeah, you're contractually obligated for the book. And for example, some people will sign with a publisher for a series, which I've written one book and I'm working on another book. And they will sign for that book and the other book and maybe a third book. Then you're contractually obligated to that publisher. But it's the same thing if you have an agent, a literary agent. I don't have a literary agent, but if you have a literary agent, they will pitch to different publishers to try to get your book out there. Now, if you're somebody like a Stephen King or an Elmore Leonard or a Michael Crichton or what have you, you're probably going to stick with one publisher that you're happy with because they want everything you write, because you've got a proven track record.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if we look at how the industry is evolving, for an independent author, it's so much more accessible, to do it all by yourself these days than it was, let's just say, 20 years ago.
There are people who self-publish. That is probably the widest way of publishing right now. And it's good and bad. Self-publishing allows people to bypass agents and even traditional publishers and get their writing out there. It's hard to pitch and find the right person or right publisher. So it gets their stuff out there. That's a positive. The negative is there's no gatekeeper. We all think we write better than we do. And sometimes things that aren't very good, or at least aren't as good as they could be, get into print. And the problem with that is that if somebody reads it, they now, even if you improve down the road, they still think of you as that book that they didn't like, that was non-professional or whatever. So that's a real danger with self-publishing, is that you might get something out that's not the best it can be, and that taints your reputation as a writer.
Yeah, I mean, now you're getting independent editors as well, who work for hire. So, you do your first draft, you will send it to them. Right. They'll fix it up.
And that's the process that people don't understand. Editors are very important. And they also don't understand that there's a first draft, and then after a few weeks or a month or two, there's a second draft where you get the editing. And then there's a third draft, and then a fourth draft. And then maybe during this time, you send it to some trusted authors that you know and say, what do you think? And they give you feedback. And after all of this, which takes anywhere from a year to maybe more, 6 months to a year, then it goes to an editor. Whether you're the editor for your publisher, I've been fortunate to have been very good editors for the publishers that I've worked with, or an editor you hire. They work with it to tell you what works, what doesn't, where there's errors in continuity. Somebody had blue eyes on page 10. Now they have brown eyes on page 52, that kind of thing. Grammar problems, structural problems, and you work on it some more. And you make more revisions, and the editor gives you more comments. So you make more revisions, and you finally get to the page proof stage, and you look for little errors. And all of this takes a long period of time from the time you sit down to write a first draft until it's finally out in publication, can easily be 2.5 to 3 years.
Crazy, eh?
Yeah. Crazy. You always have to have stuff in the pipeline. I have other drafts of things that I've finished, or I'm working on a sequel to And a Child Shall Lead Him. I'm about 3/4 of the way through a first draft. you always have to have stuff in the pipeline. Plus, I write short stories, and I'm always working on short stories and trying to get them published. And that's a whole nother type of publishing through magazines and anthologies.
You are definitely a passionate writer. I got to say that.
Well, I always tell people you have to treat it as a business. You do it every day, or try to do it every day, but you have to treat it as a hobby. There's so much rejection that if you don't enjoy doing it, you're not going to continue. Rejection is the norm. You get even successful writers, they get rejected more than they get accepted.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's wise words that comes from all authors all around the world.
Yeah.
Once again, great advice for the listeners who are up and coming authors. John, to conclude, and I hope I pronounced this right, you are a leader and a panelist for Imaginarium. Am I saying it correct?
Yes.
Now what's that? It's the first time I've ever heard of it.
Imaginarium is an interesting conference. I've gone for several years. It's in Louisville, Kentucky, which is a great city in Kentucky, United States. Imaginarium is a collection of, instead of just writers, there's fiction writers, but there's also amateur filmmakers. There's people who write comic books. There's people who do graphic design. And they all come together in one crazy, 3-day period. And there's workshops. And I've been fortunate to teach some workshops there, a workshop on research, as I said, for fiction writers, the basics of firearms for fiction writers, the basics of the military for fiction writers, and also panels, how to write a thriller, how to add suspense to your writing. I also was on panels at Killer Nashville in Nashville, Tennessee in August, so last month. And that's a great way to get in touch with your readers, get in touch with your readership, and also to add some bona fides, add some legitimacy to your own career, that, you have reached the point where you can actually teach this stuff.
Yeah. And is this open to anyone to attend?
Yes. I would encourage people to look up both those conferences if they're interested in writing, and especially writing thriller fiction or science fiction. Imaginarium in Louisville, Kentucky, usually in July, and Killer Nashville. It's all things killing, murder mysteries, thrillers, horror books, that kind of stuff. That's in just south of Nashville, Tennessee, usually in August. You can find those online. Just Google them.
In August. And the website for this, for people to find more information online?
For what? For those conferences?
Yeah, for the conferences.
Yeah, you can find it. Just Google those names, and they'll pop up. As for me, the best way to check my stuff out is my website, which is thrillerjohnb, JOHNB, all one word, .com.
Okay.
Excuse me, thrillerjohnb.net. Or a webpage for Amazon, the big company, the big sales company. That's my page on my page on Amazon is called J Bukowski, JBUKOWSKI, author, all one word, .com. So the first one's .net, thrillerjohnb.net. The second one's .com, jbukowskiauthor.com.
For the listeners that did not pick that up, it will be in the description. John, thank you so much. This was an insightful conversation, starting off with healthcare and then, transitioning into the books.
Yeah, it's I have a different kind of take on fiction writing because of my career before that. And so I'm glad we had a chance. It was nice meeting you.
Yeah. And thank you, for sharing the information, about the conference, because, there's so many science fiction, fantasy authors that I know. So I would love to share this with them, And
Yeah, there's another great conference for all types of fiction writing in Muncie, Indiana, which I've gone to a couple of times, called Midwest Writers Workshop. And that's another thing for people who are at least in the central of the United States. There's also conferences in the West Coast, in Nevada. They're all over the place. You have to look for the ones in your area.
Yeah.
And the same with the world.
Yeah. Or if you want to advance in your career, you have to do what we all did. You have to make the sacrifice and get out there.
Yep.
Go learn from the best. If you want to accomplish anything in life, you have to learn from the people that have already done it.
There's a great quote from Stephen King about writing where he says, "It's a craft that can be learned but not taught." So you have to do it. You can't just be taught how to do it. You have to actually do it to learn how to do it.
Every single day.
Yep.
Yeah. John, thank you so much. And once again, it's been a pleasure. All the best with your work to come. You seem like an author that is not going to stop anytime soon. It's in your DNA, until you leave this world. As you said, we all don't leave this world alive. And
Father Time will stop eventually, but
it's inspiring, it's inspiring for me, and I'm sure it's going to be inspiring for listeners as well. Just to show you that you're truly passionate about what you're doing, about your craft. It's with you all the way. And I love it. I absolutely love it.
And again, thanks for having me on. And to all your viewers, read a lot, write a lot.
Yeah, 100%. There's a quote to, end up with. And please do enjoy your trip to Europe. Have an awesome time.
Thank you. I will.
You may just finish off one of your projects in Europe, Who knows?
Yeah, I'm sure. It'll show up in a book somewhere.
100%. 100%. John, thank you so much. Once again, enjoy the rest of your day.
You too, Kino. I appreciate it.
All right. Bye.